realize that Israel is important and that God is not through with Israel yet. And he has divorced himself, if you will, from Israel. And he has engrafted in his program with the church. But he is going to restore Israel and accomplish what he promised them by setting up his earthly kingdom, where he will be their king and they will be his people. And so we will get to rule and reign with him during the millennial reign. We will have already been glorified and perfected and experiencing the fullness of Christ. We will have already gone through the judgment seat of Christ and the marriage supper of the Lamb. We will have already returned with Christ on white horses and watched the incredible victory that Christ wields, and the 30 days of purification, of purifying the temple and dealing with the carcasses and the carnage of the Battle of Armageddon, and walking into the millennial reign. People ask me all the time, what will we do in the millennium? Well, I don't know exactly. This is what I do know. I do know that part of what is the reward that we're given at the judgment seat of Christ directly relates to whether we rule 50s, hundreds, or thousands in his kingdom. And so do we take on the role of angels? Are we just ministering servants that help in the day-to-day with kingdom that has been set up? I really don't know, but I do know our faithfulness here to the stewarding what God has given to us directly translates into the judgment seat of Christ and the reward that we're given, that we can give back to Christ out of love and appreciation for eternal life and for the forgiveness of sin. But it also has a residual benefit, and that is how we will rule and reign with him in the millennial kingdom. And so I look forward to explaining how God is going to deal with Israel and wrap our mind around all of it. It's wonderful. And let me just say, on Sunday mornings, the Lord has laid upon my heart, we have just finished 1 Peter, and I won't be preaching this Sunday morning because we have David Gibbs III coming in for God and Country Sunday, and I know he'll be a blessing to all of us. But I'm going to preach a series of messages from Lamentations. I have pastored for 33 years, and I have never preached through the book of Lamentations. I have preached from the book of Lamentations. I have never preached through the book of Lamentations. You say, wait a minute, Pastor. We won. Why do we have to go through Lamentations? Well, let me tell you the answer. The answer is I do thank God for an American victory in the elections yesterday, and a victory for our freedom and for the advancement of the cause of Christ. But I don't want Christians to do what we did last time. Remember, I preached from Ezra. God gave us a space of grace. And you know what Christians did? And they did nothing except enjoy the space of grace for 4 years. I don't believe that God is giving to us a space of grace in order for us to just be relieved from the pressure. And I don't know that American Christians have ever properly grieved over the condition spiritually of America. I still submit to you that America's number one need is revival. And the book of Lamentations helps us to get a grasp of what it means to actually have our heart broken over sin. Broken over our sin, broken over the sin of our nation, broken over sin that is an offense to a holy God. We've been casualized in order to, or conditioned to casually approach sin as acknowledging, yeah, I know. Yeah, I really shouldn't do that. Yeah, I really should get busy about that. Yeah, I'm going to. I'm gonna stop that. I'll get to it. But we live life, and life goes on. And I think sometimes when the pressure is on somebody and the consequences are looming, they'll make deals with God. God, if this is not cancer, I will serve you. I will be faithful. I will stop that. I will start that. I'm going to get serious. I know I've been lax. I'm going to, right? Whatever the promises are, but then when it's not cancer, or they don't lose their job, or their kid doesn't go to jail, or whatever the looming consequence was that had their attention, as soon as the pressure's off, guess what happens? They go back to living life the way they did because the pressure's off. Well, I'm fearful that American Christians, and what I don't want is Faith Baptist Church Christians, because the pressure has been taken off, to not deal with what God really wants us to deal with. And so that's a little preview of Sunday mornings coming up, going through the book of Lamentations. Besides, Lamentations helps us understand a lot about life. It helps us to understand what true grieving is, because life can indeed be hard and force us to face very difficult times. And it helps us understand how to do that and how to help others who are going through that. And so I think it'll be a help to all of us. The book of Daniel, now that I've teased you with the book of Lamentations and almost got into my first message, because that's what I do, and we're going to get to Daniel. The book of Daniel is written when Judah, the southern kingdom, has been taken into captivity. I hinted at this on Sunday, but I think it's worth mentioning again. God did not want to put Judah into captivity to the Babylonians. He did not want to. It wasn't a situation where the Israelites are like, oh, we're in captivity, but you know what? God was always going to do what God was going to do. We just got to trust him. Can I tell you something? Sometimes people's disobedience forces God to do what he needs to do, whether or not it's what he wanted to do. Just like parenting. I never spanked my kids or disciplined them because I wanted to. Because, parents just do what parents do. No, I only disciplined my kids when their behavior warranted it, when they left me no choice. Can I tell you that's exactly what Christians do to God oftentimes. That's what the children of Israel did to God multiple times as we watch them throughout the Old Testament. It wasn't God just doing what God's going to do. No, God had to do what they required him to do because of their behavior. And I really do think it's important for us to realize that even in those times, people's decisions affect other people. Now, I don't believe that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were perfect. They obviously were sinners. God, by choice, does not mention a sin of Daniel. He doesn't let us in on that side of Daniel's life. If God was going to put me in the Bible for everybody to read, I would rather him, deal with me as Daniel and not as David or Solomon or whatever, right? Revealing all of their weaknesses to everybody. But for whatever reason, God just doesn't deal with the fact that Daniel was a sinner and some of the decisions that he would have made, but rather shows us the faithfulness of Daniel to God's plan for his life. And yet, I don't believe that Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego actually were participating in the sins of serving other gods or pursuing selfish agendas that cost Israel to go into captivity. But can I tell you, your decisions will affect somebody else. If you're a parent, your decisions will directly affect your children. If you're married, your decisions will affect your spouse. In a church, a member's decision affects other people. It's just the way it is. In a nation, people's decisions can affect the whole. And so here we have the people of Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel, that God had dealt with and sent prophet after prophet to warn them, had scolded them, and had even spanked them, and warned them about the path they were on. But they ignored all of that, and they decided to pursue that path anyway. And in 586 BC, the Babylonians took captivity over the southern kingdom, Judah. Verse number 1 of chapter 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. By the way, if you study Jehoiakim, he is also known as Eliakim. King of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. Boy, what an indictment. What a sad story that the children of Israel's lack of concern about bringing glory to God, the children of Israel's lack of concern about what would please God, their lack of diligence in obeying God, did not just affect them, but Nebuchadnezzar went in to their house of worship and took their vessels of gold that belonged to God and took them down to Shinar to his God and kept them there. I was trying as nice as I could, but as passionately as I could on Sunday, to warn American Christians that God is patient and long-suffering with his children. But there is a line. There is a time where he says, okay, I have tried long enough. I have waited long enough. And what you think you're always going to have can actually be taken away from you. Did you know that husbands can be stupid long enough that they lose their wife? Wives can be foolish long enough that they lose their husband. Its decisions have futures. You take for granted, you think they're always going to be. But it can. It just requires doing things God's way. And when God smacks you and says, hey, listen, you're selfish. Hey, you got to stop that. You got to quit doing that. That is hurtful. That's harmful to your marriage. That is out of bounds. Oh, yeah. But then they do it again. They do it again. They do it again. And guess what happens? Then they're in my office crying, saying, she left or he left. I never thought, I was such a fool. Right. there's a line. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just telling you the way life works, right? You have a good job and you show up late and I'm so sorry, I got caught in traffic, I overslept, yeah. And you do that long enough and the boss calls you in and says, hey, listen, I know you have a good job and we pay you a good wage, but you know what? 3 strikes and you're out. And they're like, I had such a good job. Now what am I going to do? Right. There's a line. Did you know that's true with God? And it's going to affect somebody else other than just you. And that's true of American Christians. It's true of churches. It's true of individual Christians. God is patient, but there is a line. And at that point, he allows the natural consequences that he warned us about, that we thought maybe would never happen, to actually happen because of our foolish, stubborn, headstrong demand to get our own way and to live our own way. That's Israel. And so God is saying, you know what? They're not just going to take you captive. They're going to take away your opportunity to worship God. And they're going to take the things that you use to worship God and give to their gods. I watched our woke society create fear in Christians to close their mouths and to change their testimony so that they could further their agenda that is anti-God, that is unscriptural, and to replace the emphasis of a God-fearing country into a country that thumbs its nose at a holy God and says, do something about it. And unfortunately, that was Judah. But let me tell you, there's good news. I wanted to get the bad news out of the way right off the bat. But here we find the good news, and that is in the midst of God's judgment, he always raises up a remnant. He is going to do his work, and he'll do it through faithful individuals who are willing to do right, even when the consequences are potentially high. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, and Ashpenaz was the one who oversaw those that served the king, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, and well-favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meal and of the wine which he drank, as so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the princes of the eunuchs gave names, for they gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and unto Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Well, I'm going to deal with that next week, Lord willing, and talk a little bit more about what God did according to Daniel's request. But what I want us to draw our attention to is what stands out in verse number 4. What were the testimony of these children? What were the testimony of these young men? Because I find that God really wants us to model our parenting after what it was that is described here in verse number 4. What kind of young men were they? Well, they were men in whom there was no blemish, well-favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and had the ability in them to stand in the king's palace. I think to myself, now that is a fine young man. What does that look like? I'm going to give to us the outline, but I want to draw your attention to the last verse, because this is what is happening in our world. In other words, God said that he wants us to be salt and light. But what Nebuchadnezzar said is, I want the cream of the crop of the children of Judah, and I want the cream of the crop for a specific reason. I'm not looking for the lazy. I'm not looking for the foolish. I'm not looking for the ignorant. I'm not looking for the one who has no initiative. I'm not looking for the one who refuses to learn. I'm not looking for them. I want the cream of the crop. Did you know that the devil is the same way? Do you know that if we have young people who are lazy, if we have young people who are self-centered, if we have young people who are self-serving or self-promoting, this is a problem. But can I tell you, the devil has less interest in them. In fact, some would submit he's kind of already got them. But who is he after? Nebuchadnezzar said, I want the cream of the crop. Why? Well, the last part of the verse tells us, and that is that they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar said, I want the cream of the crop in order to indoctrinate them in the culture and behavior and worship of the Chaldeans. I don't want them worshiping their God. What I want them to do is to have an indoctrination that turns them away from their God so that they embrace the culture, the worship, the language, the way of life of the Chaldeans. Did you know the devil's the same way? He's looking for the cream of the crop to turn their hearts away from God so that their hearts can be indoctrinated with secular humanism. You might have a problem with Karl Marx. I do. He was a secular humanist and unfortunately successfully influential in culture and in society. You might have a problem with Horace Mann, and I do too. But can I tell you that these individuals were able to influence entire segments of our culture and influence our society today with indoctrination? And you know what they believed? You got to get them when they're young. You got to get them in the elementary. Did you know that the LGBTQ and all of the transgender nonsense that we're facing in our woke society, you wonder, why are they putting this in kindergarten curriculum? Because they want to find the cream of the crop and indoctrinate them in the ways of secular humanism. To indoctrinate them in something away from what you, the parents, in fact, I don't know why that wasn't on the ballot this year. I don't know why that wasn't more of the campaigning issue today, that we have a woke society that has simply thumbed their nose at God's design for the responsibility of parents and said, you know what, we're going to bring them into our schools and we're going to indoctrinate them and we're going to let them decide if they want to go by a different pronoun, and we're going to let them decide if they want to go on some hormone-changing prescription, and we're going to put it into the fiber of Michigan law that parents don't have to be told. By the way, that was Prop 3 in 2022. That I crisscrossed all over this nation, working very long hours and doing things to fit in, speaking at various rallies to warn people about what was in Prop 3. You know what the sad thing was? Is not that it just squeaked by. It was overwhelmingly voted into law, not because that's where most Michiganders are, but because most Michiganders never had the initiative to even go vote. And so now we have it woven into our very laws by an act of the people, so that Nebuchadnezzar, if you will, can indoctrinate the cream of the crop in the culture of wokeism and anti-Bible, anti-God philosophies. You see, it hasn't changed much, has it? And so when you stop and you think about this story, understand that we really are facing the same thing that was happening way back here. The devil's the same. His strategy hasn't changed that much. And his desire for young people, if he can get them young, he can keep them a long time. And so I want to do two things. Number one, I want to explain, well, what is the cream of the crop? What was this type of person? Because these are the type of people that we want. These are the type of children we want to produce. This is the kind of behavior that we want to instill. What he explains here and what was true of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is beautiful. And how do we get young men like these men? Well, first of all, there was no blemish. In other words, these were men of character. These were young boys who had character. What is that? These were individual boys who understood that you are required to do a job. You do the best you can when you're required to be there at 8 o'clock, that you show up before 8 o'clock so you can start at 8 o'clock. In other words, these were people of character. One of the things that I oftentimes will tell parents when they ask me about our school, about our daycare and preschool, I tell them, well, basically, we do one thing. We link arms with parents for the development of their children. We're not going to own the responsibility for the development of your children. That's yours. We're just going to link arms with you and assist in what you're trying to do with your children. And what we look for are parents who want to instill character, turning out a product of young people who know what is right, decide to do what is right, and are able to influence others to do right. I said our whole culture is trying to find young people who actually will show up to do a job and work the entire time and fulfill their job. And they're looking for young men and young ladies who have the character to work. And we're going to teach them character. You know what most parents tell me? Yes, that's what we want. I can be pretty patient with young people who do dumb things, who make dumb decisions. And some of the reasons why I can be so patient with school-age kids who make dumb decisions and do dumb things and not kick them out is because I was one of those kids, right? I didn't always make good decisions. And kids are kids. But can I tell you, I'm rather impatient when it's not the kid that I'm fighting, it's the parent. The parent doesn't want us to develop character. When we are doing what's necessary to develop character in their young people, they fight back against us. And I can learn very quickly, you know what, we're not a lengthening arm. We're not a partner to what they're doing. We actually become the antithesis of what they're trying to do. I can graciously look at that parent and say, listen, I love you. I wish we could work together. But your kid is really going to suffer when you have one set of ideals and we are trying to do something different. And so it's better for your kid to not be in that environment. What's best for the kid is when they get into trouble at school, they get into trouble at home. That what is expected of the kid at school is the same thing that's expected of the kid at home, right? This is just character development. Teaching them when they have an assignment that they are expected to do the assignment. When the assignment is due at a certain time, that's when they are to turn it in. If they do not do it, then there are consequences. You know what we call that? Real life. That's the way life works. And that you get out of what you put in. Gary made a great point in Chat with a Pastor when he was saying, you know, he had taught his kids and he has learned that we typically get out of what we put in. And he said, and Donald Trump definitely put in the effort to become the president. 900 rallies. Really? That's incredible. He's like the Energizer Bunny. And he put in, well, you know what? That's true. No matter how you feel about Donald Trump, you do have to at least admire his work ethic. He has a great work ethic. And we want to teach people character. We want to teach them a work ethic. And character is beyond just work ethic, but I think it includes that. And so we should be striving to produce young people of character. And then young people, well-favored. This idea of well-favored, I've used the word charming. In other words, we want kids that are charming. We want kids who are kind and polite. This word, well-favored, also has the idea of healthy. In other words, they exercise and they eat appropriately. They're not hooked on junk food. They don't want to be lazy and not want to do anything, right? These are well favored. They're charming individuals. They're pleasant to be around. They're people that you enjoy having been in their company or inviting them to help you with a project, or to spend time with them in fellowship. They're well favored, they're charming, and skillful in all wisdom and understanding, cunning in knowledge. The Bible says, I want them to know something about something. I am so thankful that I had the privilege of growing up on a farm. I'm grateful that my dad saw it important that I learn some things, that I be well-rounded. I'm thankful that God gave me a natural ability in sports, and my parents encouraged me to develop those talents and to enjoy those talents and to fulfill working at developing those the best that I could and to excel in those. But my dad said that's not all that I want him to do. I don't want him to live life only being able to do athletics. And so when I was young on the farm, he taught me to drive a tractor. He taught me how to run a skid steer, much younger than my mother was comfortable in him teaching me to run it, right? And all of those things. But then I learned how to make silage and why different machines were the way that they functioned and what they were able to do and why and how you treat animals and why you feed them this at this point and how much you feed them at that point and why different grains do different things for them. And my dad was teaching me a lot. I'm thankful that at 7th grade I learned to do flat cement work and to do brick and block. And that at 14 years old I started learning to build pole barns and to work with a pole barn architect and contractor. And then at 16, I began building houses and learning to read blueprints and to be able to understand framing. And my dad taught me how to do flooring and how to do drywall, how to do electrical, how to do plumbing. You say, why did he do all of that? Well, he just wanted me to be cunning in knowledge. He just wanted me to know about stuff. You know why? Because it helps in life. We have become so lazy in our society in what we expect from our kids. And some of it, we don't expect much of our kids because we don't want people to expect much from us. And so what God is saying here is this is the cream of the crop. If you want your kids to be the cream of the crop, then teach them character and teach them to be charming, teach them to be cunning in knowledge and how to be a critical thinker. It says, they were cunning in knowledge and understanding science. I am so frustrated with our culture and the lack of ability to think critically. We live in a culture that, oh, you want me to do? Oh, okay. Oh, that's the way it is. Oh, I didn't know. Okay. And we're just not able to think at another level, to critically process the data to say, okay, does this really work? Is this really the way life functions? Is 2 plus 2 actually equaling 4? You see, it says understanding science. It is not necessarily just saying they need to be a biologist or they have to be a specific scientist in a specific arena. It is just simply giving us the idea of the way God allows life to function. How is it that common sense is not common anymore? God is just simply saying this: if you want the cream of the crop, then you teach your children to think critically, to be critical thinkers, to be able to process data in how it relates to real life. Does 2 plus 2 equal 4? We know that the language of science is mathematics. So we can look at situations and say, in common sense, does that really work? I don't even know how to address some people because of what I consider absolute stupidity. It can't work. People who are a male saying, I am going to be a female. No, you're not. The animal world and the plant world knows better than that. Right? It's impossible. No. I am now identified as, and if you take that to its extreme, now we have people, I am a dog, I am a cat, I am a bird. You say, that's absurd. Right. And yet we have a culture that can't figure out that you don't protect those people, you don't cater to those people, you tell them they're acting like an idiot. That doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. Can we not get back to just allowing life to show us how it works and utilizing a little common sense? This idea that I don't want to work, I just want somebody to pay all my bills. Well, wouldn't that be nice? It's just not the way life works. It won't work out for you. Why? Because that's not how it works. That's not real life. And God is saying here is that I want them to be critical thinkers, to actually be able to process data and actually come to the conclusion, does that make sense? Can that even work? Will that do what they think it's going to do? And then he says, and such as had the ability in them to stand in the king's palace. Children of character who are charming, cunning in knowledge, critical thinkers, and confident. To be able to stand in the king's palace with some confidence. I like the way that it says, and those who have the ability. In other words, this is something that is developed. This is something that is instilled. By the way, parents, do not teach your children to be confident in their own strength. They'll question that in time because they don't have what it takes. God already told you that. You have to wean them off of the confidence that they have in you. That's parenting, is weaning them off the dependence that they have on me to a dependence upon God and His Word. Their confidence to stand must come from what God has designed and the part they play, and they do it with confidence. Why? Because they know what God has designed. They know what that requires of them and how they live by faith for what God's going to do. In other words, have a little confidence. God is teaching us this is the cream of the crop. And we as parents should be striving to develop this in our children. But can I give you a warning? When you do, the devil would love to hijack them for his own reasons. So you better keep pouring into them, and you better protect them, and you better help them, and you better give them the tools. And one of the things we're going to see next week is when you do, when you help these people to have these character traits, you'll be able to watch them stand against a culture, to stand against the indoctrination, to be able to stand up with a little confidence and courage and say, let me challenge your thinking. Let me put you to the test. And we'll talk about that next week. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for reminding us of what it is that you find as the cream of the crop. Thank you for the example of Daniel and Meshach and Shadrach and Abednego, and how these young men were examples of what it is that we as parents are to strive to produce and to instill in our children. But Lord, may we realize that the devil lurks and society is out there looking for the opportunity to sift them like wheat, to be able to take them and re-indoctrinate them for their own causes and own benefits, teaching them to use what it is that they've been taught for selfish reasons or for secular causes. Lord, may we understand whose we are and who we are in Christ, and teach our children to stand firm, confident, because they belong to you and are empowered by you, so that